Hi, welcome to Slideshow. My name is Dave Hayward. I'm the founder of Europa Creative Partners. This episode's guest is Sam Browne. Sam has been a number of things throughout his career. He's been a musician, recording albums in Nashville. He is a successful entrepreneur, running a number of businesses. And what he's known for latterly is a personal brand, especially personal brand on LinkedIn. His own LinkedIn following is over 100,000 people. So it's a really great chat. If you could, please like and subscribe to the show. It really helps us, and let's get into it. Lots of people online talking about personal brand at the moment. It seems to be something that's in the zeitgeist. What does it mean for you, and why do you think it's so important in this day and age?
Yeah, look, I had never even heard of it when I started writing on LinkedIn. I don't think I'd ever heard that phrase, or if I had, it didn't mean anything to me. You know, I started on LinkedIn in January 2022 as I had wanted to kind of build some sort of outlet for writing or a podcast or something, kind of sharing all my entrepreneur experiences over the best part of 20 years. And LinkedIn at the time was just kind of coming online as a creative platform. So there were things like, I guess in the old days, there would be a blog where you would just be sharing your thoughts on your blog, and other people would be linking to you from their blogs. Then we had, say, medium.com. Things like Substack were kind of getting going as well. But LinkedIn felt like a really good fit for me as a creative entrepreneur who had built a handful of businesses and really just wanted to kind of start sharing those lessons and kind of hopefully creating more opportunities for myself outside of just New Zealand, and building an international network. I didn't have a great game plan on day one for it, and kind of what happened next over the next 2 years took me by surprise. But what happened is I muddled through building what I would now call a personal brand. And as a result of doing that, all kinds of interesting opportunities came my way, both in terms of income and career, but also connections with amazing people, going on podcasts with people who I was a fan of, who I'd been listening to their podcasts for years or watching their videos, speaking in Europe. So all these really cool things happened just as a result of sharing my stories online.
I love the way that you talk about LinkedIn being a creative medium, because it's not associated with that as a business medium. But I guess what's really interesting about it is that creativity has led to actually growing your business. It's kind of counterintuitive in a sort of in a way. So shall we maybe hop to the next slide? Yeah.
So to give some context for these slides, this was a masterclass I delivered about 2 weeks ago. I shared with my audience, I'll be doing a LinkedIn masterclass teaching you kind of a deep dive into personal brand, like a 1 hour deep dive. And I did that because I am launching a LinkedIn course and community in 2 or 3 weeks, and wanted to give them kind of a taste of what they would get if they were to join this. It's a cohort-based course, so we'll be teaching it live. And so that was the idea, as like a 1 hour preview. So I started with my story. And so my story is, I started building online businesses back in 2008. I launched a music agency, which I still have, Find a Band. And so we book live bands and DJs for corporate events and weddings. And that's how you and I met many moons ago. And that allowed me to fund my music career. So I recorded 2 albums as a singer and guitarist, one in New Zealand, one in Nashville, and had some minor hits in New Zealand in the rock charts with that band. It was called Black River Drive. And then, so I did Find a Band, I did Auckland weddings, New Zealand venues. So these are all kind of marketplace sites that I did that were associated with the New Zealand events industry. It all kind of started with Find a Band, I guess. And then, COVID hit, totally annihilated any kind of events related business. We went from, 100K a month in band bookings to zero, and in fact, negative, because we were giving out refunds all day long. And so I started, that wasn't like because I had nothing to do, I started on LinkedIn, but it so happens that I started right at the tail end of COVID, kind of sharing entrepreneur experiences. And over the next 2 years, I was able to grow my audience from 0 to 100,000 followers on LinkedIn, and have built a great little business consulting mostly with US entrepreneurs and helping them build their personal brands on LinkedIn.
100,000 is absolutely incredible, especially from New Zealand, where presumably a lot of your audience would have to be international to kind of reach those sorts of numbers, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been I pretty much focus now in terms of clients on the US market and post at US centric times. So yeah, I've worked with a handful of Kiwis, but it'd be 10-1 Americans that I'm working with.
Is there sort of any difference in the way that you might approach LinkedIn with a more US centric view than you would, say, if you're trying to get successful in your location, like around New Zealand or Australia?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the way LinkedIn works best, or the types of businesses that best benefit from it, are those that are not location dependent. So if you are someone who works in a very specific location, my experience has been that LinkedIn is a really hard way to drum up clients for you, just because the number of people who are potentially seeing your stuff is so limited. So of course, with so many of our businesses now being digital and ourselves being, remote work being kind of a relatively standard thing for so many businesses, it's become much less important, I guess. Things like, where you're based, when you post. My experience has been, we're all working across time zones all of the time, which was a big shift, working with New Zealand businesses up until that point, that was not the case, but I've gotten used to having Zoom calls at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it's a real feature. I mean, definitely for Europa, our clients, a good percentage of them are overseas. And I guess what's interesting is that sort of really talks to the value of working with someone like you, because your audience is actually potentially quite a large total addressable market if you've got sort of exportable services that you can work anywhere, right?
Without a doubt. Yeah, I just had a call before this actually with somebody working with New Zealand tradie businesses and helping them with digital marketing, and I was kind of gently saying to her, I think you could go a lot wider than that. You're massively limiting yourself by saying, I just work with New Zealand, because obviously these, if she's doing SEO and AdWords for these businesses, there's no reason at all why that would only be in New Zealand. I think in some ways it's a confidence thing for New Zealand entrepreneurs that we sort of see ourselves as being New Zealanders and working with New Zealanders, and there's the big bad world out there, but we're not part of it. It's been a bit of a shift for me that, everybody's the same and has the same sort of problems in their business. Granted, there are some, the scalability of businesses in these larger territories, Europe and the US, means, yes, there are people with different problems, but a lot of the time I'm dealing with people who are solo consultants, or they have a team of 3 to 4, 5, 10 people. Very comparable situation to New Zealand businesses.
Yeah. And if you had an ideal customer, what would that look like?
I think that the ideal client for me, helping somebody build their personal brand on LinkedIn, is a creative entrepreneur, anywhere from a well-established, successful consultant who might be doing $300,000 to $500,000 a year, up to somebody, say, running a design agency with 5 to 10 staff. Somebody who's probably there's probably some marketing in there somewhere in terms of their offer. And there's creativity as part of it as well. That would be my sweet spot.
Yeah, it seems to me that what's interesting about your work is that none of it, it's very systematic. From what obviously I have some experience with it, and it's very systematic, but it doesn't work at all if you don't have a creative spark or some sort of creative ability in order to stand out amongst what's quite a crowded field, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people understandably look at LinkedIn like, say, Google Ads, and they'll say, how do I just get to getting the leads in the door? And theoretically that can work, where you can do mass outreach campaigns, for example, but it's going to work a hell of a lot better if you have that presence on LinkedIn where you're sharing your experience, you're sharing your stories, sharing your expertise, and building authority, where you can, in many cases, quite quickly become kind of a known, recognized authority in your industry by having that creative element. And I think people like yourself take it for granted that it's part of your life as it is part of mine. So if you are someone lucky enough to have creativity as part of your makeup, it's a massive edge over someone who is, say, really technically skilled but doesn't know how to communicate that in a creative way.
I think there's another aspect which I find really interesting about your work, and that is the personal part. Because we say personal brand, it's on a business network, but I'm sure a lot of people would question why you need to bring in that personal element when it's a business platform. What would you say to someone like that who might be a bit resistant to kind of share perhaps something that's not necessarily directly or adjacent to what they're doing as a business.
Yeah, this comes up a lot, and I completely get it. What this does, so what we're talking about, in fact, I've got a slide about it. Let me see if I can get to that slide. Perfect. So when we are building a brand on LinkedIn, a personal brand, we are building brand you. What we want to do is we want to get your positioning dialed in and your personal brand dialed in. And when we know those two things, they become the foundations of our content. So we'll talk about content in a minute, but I think of it like the positioning side of it is the business element of who you are. So I'm working with people who are business owners, not people looking for jobs or working as part of an organization. So these are people who've started businesses, will potentially start more businesses, or will build their existing business in the years and decades to come. So the positioning side of it, for the purposes of LinkedIn, for building a brand, is who are you working with? What is the outcome that you get for them? What does your business do differently to other people who offer the same service as you? And then the personal brand side of it is, what is your personality? What does it feel like to spend time with you? What do people like about you? What is interesting about your life, whether in the past or now, that separates you from other people? So I share the example of my background in music and recording albums and the types of bands that we've played with and so forth. It's not a huge component of my content. It's a small part of it, but I include it. It's like seasoning. It's like I want people to think of me and go, he helps, creative entrepreneurs to grow on LinkedIn, and he has that background in music, and he has his music agency, because that makes me one of one. That means that I'm not competing with other LinkedIn coach type people. I'm the creative one with real creative proof of concept. So a certain type of person says, if I'm going to do this thing, if I'm going to learn LinkedIn, I'm only going to do it with that guy. He's my guy. We are similar. And that's the point of personal content, that, as in any business, all other things being equal, if we're choosing between two people to work with, we choose a person that we like more, that we think we will enjoy working with.
Yeah, I think what I find interesting about that concept is that, the people, even in really kind of big scale, people buy from people. They want, especially, and in fact, almost directly proportionately, the bigger the stakes, the more that they want to trust the person that they're working with, and one of the ways that you can trust them is to find them relatable, I guess. And something that I've noticed a fair bit, even in my sort of limited sphere of LinkedIn and newsletters and all the sort of stuff that we do at Europa, is that people form a parasocial relationship with you without realizing it. And I'm doing that with other people, So I think that's why that personal brand aspect of it seems so critical, but it's very difficult to get right, I imagine.
Yeah, totally. Oh, you're making my job easy. Parasocial relationship. Yeah. I love it. That's right.
Yeah.
So the parasocial relationship, if you haven't come across that concept before, which I hadn't before, my social media time, it means that your reader, the person who's engaging with your content, feels that they have a relationship with you, not in a fake way, but they feel about you the way that they would feel about a friend, even though you understandably may not be aware of them at all, because they're consuming your content, but they're not necessarily spending time with you in person. They probably aren't. So it means that you can have that kind of friend warmth with a lot of people through consistently sharing your content and sharing it in a way that is your way of doing it. And so what happens is when you finally connect and you get on a Zoom call or something to discuss working together, they will often say something like, oh, I've been reading your stuff for the last 2 years and, you really inspired me to do this. And I really love the way that you do that. And honestly, purely from a sales and marketing point of view, so much of the work has been done through that parasocial relationship. And as you said, the word is trust. There's so much trust baked in. They know what they're going to get, and they're willing to invest, potentially serious money with you much more easily than if it was a cold kind of first meeting where you'd never had anything to do with each other. Because when you have those meetings, you're feeling each other out. Like, who is this person? What are they into? Are they, do they like to, are we gonna have a lot of laughs, or is this going to be really down to business and serious? All of these things that when you're following somebody's content for a while, you kind of get to know that feeling, their vibe, and you're either attracted to it or repelled by it. And the people that you are attracted to, if and when you need the thing they sell, they're going to be the only game in town for you.
I guess the other question is, how do I determine what my personal brand is?
Let me see.
Because, it's a little bit like when I got married, I found it quite interesting because at the wedding, there was this collision of all these different people that don't normally, aren't necessarily all together at the same time. So there was kind of work Dave, there was, family Dave, there was friend Dave, and they're all in this kind of mix. But when you've got a kind of curated self like you do on LinkedIn, then surely part of that is actually about establishing what your personal brand is and having some idea what that might be.
What I found when I started exploring this personal brand thing, so I heard this expression thrown around a lot on LinkedIn, build your personal brand, you need a personal brand. As you mentioned, it's kind of entered the zeitgeist of, digital marketing in general. It's kind of like this nice to have, I guess, in 2025. And so I started, researching, okay, well, what's the book to read to find out what this is all about? I was searching for a kind of a definitive definition and like the godfather or godmother of personal brand. And there kind of isn't anyone. There's nobody where everybody goes, yeah, she wrote the book. You need to read that and then you really understand personal brand. So ultimately I had to kind of piece things together and come up with a definition based on what I found that made sense for me, for my own personal brand, and for teaching clients. I needed to give them a framework. And so I came up with this. It's sort of an 8-part framework, and I'll speak to what each of these are talking about. So, the idea with your personal brand is to discover like an elevator pitch of who you are. So imagine that you had 45 seconds, a minute in an elevator with someone. And they said, I need to understand who you are. What would you tell them if you had 1 minute? Until I started doing this, I thought, man, you end up kind of rambling about all sorts of stuff because we don't think of ourselves this way. But the nature of social media is it's fast and it's kind of like the trailer or the movie poster, but not the movie, right? We need to give people this real highlight reel version of who we are. So if you want to do that with yourself, the things to think about would be, first of all, your experience, so your work experience and your personal experience. So, your work experience is your career. Your personal experience might be if you ever did a 6-month backpacking trip through Europe. That would be a little piece of who you are, and that has defined who you've become in your life. Your skills and knowledge. So this could be, your university education, but it could also be skills that you've acquired since then through reading or through doing many, sort of short courses, these sorts of things. Your superpowers, this is one that people are often quite blind to. And again, I kind of learned this about myself through social media. So your superpowers are skills that you have that come incredibly naturally to you, that you are unusually good at. They're usually kind of built in. They're usually not things that you've developed, and they're kind of really integral to who you are. So a good example would be someone who is funny. We all know people who are just really witty and constantly making us laugh, and this is a big part of who they are, but they don't necessarily think of themselves that way. They think that everyone thinks that way because they don't have any point of reference. Yeah. So that's a pretty blatant one, but often it'll be more subtle than this. So for myself, the one that I learnt through feedback on social media and talking to my partner, who helped me a lot to get clear on my own personal brand, was I am good at taking a complicated concept and then breaking it down and making it relatively simple to understand and learn. And I think that is, and this is just my theory, I learned that I was ADHD when I was 40 in 2022. And I think that my ADHD has meant I don't learn the same as other people. And in order to learn something, I have to kind of break it down into simple pieces and then reassemble it in a way that makes it easy for me to understand. So because I have to do that for myself, I can do it relatively easily for other people. So this is like a fairly obscure superpower that I was totally oblivious to until I started asking questions about myself to better understand this. And so what we're trying to do with our personal brands is get this understanding of what are our superpowers, what exactly are our life experiences that are going to be interesting. And I guess the criteria is like, it's interesting to other people. It's for other people understanding who we are. So some of the other ones, focus would be what are you working on right now? That could be a major project, or it could be something that finishes in the next month or two. This would be specifically to LinkedIn and specifically for the type of content that you're sharing. And then goals is essentially the same thing, but long term. So what are you working towards long term over the next 3, 5, 10 years? Your beliefs and values, this is going to be, why do you do the things you do, both in your career and in your work life? I'll give you an example. If you are someone who values family and values a strong relationship with your children, you might potentially share in your content, how you went to your child's school play, and it was held at 3 p.m. in the school hall on a Tuesday. So you left work early in order to be there and to do that with them. So that's a value. There would be other people who would be highlighting the fact that they work late every single night because they're building something for the future and they think it's worth the sacrifice. So this is not a good or a bad thing. This is just your values.
That's how it is, yeah.
And finally, your wild cards are things about you that are completely unexpected but interesting. So for yourself, your background as a training as an artist, as a fine artist, totally unexpected, interesting, unusual, that's a wild card.
I think what's interesting about going back to the superpowers thing is that often you can find them by when they don't work. One of my superpowers, I think, is being able to hold a conversation with almost anyone about almost anything. I know a little bit about something. And I had this client who unfortunately was my biggest client in the UK, and she was so insufferably dull that I actually found she was kind of like kryptonite. So when I'd go to, she'd talk to me. I remember one time she started telling me about her ride-on mower and this really and I was kind of like accessing ride-on mower, and I was like, oh my God, I haven't got anything. This is, she's amazing.
Yeah.
This is incredible.
She's
it's like
broken me.
Yeah, broken my system. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I understand a little bit about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so these things sort of, you can very quickly see this is a beautiful way of breaking it down, because you can see almost anyone kind of going systematically through this. I can imagine doing this with my wife or close friends, and it would uncover some really interesting stuff that's probably just as useful for life as it is for what the LinkedIn thing. And I think what I like about your work and what you talk about generally is that they're actually being authentic. It's not about the kind of artifice. It's actually about trying to be as real as possible that's consistent with your goals and your values.
Yeah, totally. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, actually. My partner, Jenny, built a really good YouTube channel. She built it to, I want to say 45,000 subscribers. It was a true crime channel.
Oh, wow.
Dealing with increasingly gory true crime. This is something that she's really interested in. We both are. It's actually kind of how we connected in the first place. At a party, we started talking about true crime. And it was a topic she was really interested in. So she started to build a social media brand around true crime. And then she found, as she was creating all this content, researching these cases, she was spending more and more and more of her life in darkness, surrounded by murderers and the worst of the worst. And it kind of came to a head where she was doing research into the Lundy murders in Christchurch.
Yeah.
And she got so deep into it that she was communicating with people who were very close to the case. And at her request, they sent her crime scene photos that had not been released to the public. And without going into great detail, it was an axe murder. And it was some really horrendous stuff to see. And more or less at that moment, within a week of that, she realized that this was not the world she wanted to live in as she's building a brand. So she shut that down and basically started completely from scratch. She's now built a brand around dark fiction. So, and a podcast interviewing authors who write dark fiction. And so this is, I think, a perfect example where somebody has started building a personal brand that is not really, it seems like it's values aligned. And then you get into it and you kind of learn, this is not a world I want to live in. And so, yeah, for myself, thank you for saying, something that I'm trying to continually tap back into is, what is my authentic self? How shall I best show up in a way that is totally values aligned and is helpful and, hopefully inspiring to other people. The thing that I don't want to do is find myself creating content just as a means to an end to generate money, for example, but not really feeling it, not really being totally aligned with what I'm putting out there. And it's a subtle thing, but it's a bit of a trap with social, that you can start creating the content that does well, that isn't necessarily really what you want to be creating and what you want to be known for.
I guess that's the other side of it, is there is authentic and then there's too authentic, because I think my experience is, I'm obviously a Gen Xer and emotionally repressed, unlikely to really talk about, I don't know, how I had a bad mental health day or something on LinkedIn, for example. But there are, those sorts of posts can become quite viral. And I guess one of the things that may be a trap, correct me if I'm wrong, but it could be that virality is not actually necessarily what you want all the time, especially if it's not in line with what you're establishing here.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I didn't answer your previous question very well. I'm going to try and address it better. So personal content is an interesting thing, where what you want to do ideally is share something that is specific to you, a story that is yours, an experience that you had that is yours, but equally to different extents for different people. You don't need to feel uncomfortable about it. So if I am writing something or I'm working with a client and they're thinking about posting something and they're saying, or I'm thinking, this is really more than I want to share with the entire world, just don't. It's sort of something that you become more comfortable with, and also the subtle nuance of it becomes more clear over time. So a good example, a post of yours where you shared that you had scaled a mountain while you were in Indonesia with your family, and you had a photo of the family, and you've gotten up really early in the morning to get up there for the sunrise. That's a really good example of a personal post that is not uncomfortably oversharing, but it shows so much about who you are, right? Like you're focused on the family. You're willing to do hard things for an amazing reward, like an incredible sunrise first thing in the morning, but you had to get up at 2:00 in the morning to get it. And it's just it's showing us, your life outside of work. So instead of just learning, marketing tips from Dave, now we think of Dave, the marketing guy, and he went to that holiday in Indonesia, and they got up really early in the morning and scaled that mountain. And that's just one little pebble. The idea is to keep building them over time, where people start to think of you a certain way. And that's why I call it the mindshare method. You're dropping these little pebbles into people's minds that build up over time until they get a really good sense of who you are and what you're all about.
Let's talk some more about pebbles, because this looks actually to me like, on the right hand side there, that this is kind of a collection of pebbles.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sort of what personal content is? How do you define what personal content is and does?
Yeah, okay, sure. So personal content, actually the first thing I should talk about is this. So when I'm advising clients on the percentages of different types of content to create, there are really three buckets. So there's authority content. This is the content that positions you as an authority in your industry. And the way that you do that is essentially through content that educates. So this is sort of sharing little tidbits of your expertise, one page or one post at a time. And that's going to be the lion's share of your content on LinkedIn. And then we combine that with personal content. So this is sharing who you are, why you do, what you're working on right now. So in a nutshell, the stories that are your stories to tell, as opposed to teaching concepts and ideas and well-worn frameworks from your industry. So I say to people, you're not a human textbook. You're not just showing up on LinkedIn and sharing the facts about, say, marketing, putting your spin on those facts, but then also sharing your story alongside it. And that is where it becomes a personal brand. So I suggest about 1 in 4 posts is a personal post. And then finally, sales posts. So these are posts where you are attracting and converting leads. And this really works best when you've got the combination of the three. So you've got your authority content where you're educating your audience. You've got your trust building content, which is sharing your stories. And then you've got your lead generating content, which comes as a result or works best when combined with authority content and personal content.
And let's talk a little bit about authority content, because I think we've gone a little bit upstream by talking about personal content on LinkedIn. That's something that's counterintuitive. Something that I think people struggle to do well is authority content. And if we look at your framework, then that is, is a lion's share of what you're meant to be talking about. What does it do, and how should you go about it?
Yeah, that's true. I would usually start with authority content. Yeah, so authority content is all about answering the questions that your target audience has, so that your buyer has. So if you think of the sorts of problems that people have when they come to you, in a nutshell, you are answering question by question with each post. I think I've got some good questions here. Yeah, so this is kind of part of when I'm helping clients define their positioning, but the positioning is all about uncovering their authority content. So a key to this, when you're mapping out the content you're going to create, the authority content, it's really about answering these sorts of questions. What problems does your audience, and when I say audience, you could substitute that for potential buyer, prospective buyer. What problems does your buyer face? Where are they losing time, money, or opportunities? What are mistakes that they are typically making? So these will be things they're probably not even aware that they're getting wrong. What frameworks do you follow to help clients? What are the key things you provide for them to achieve success? What sets you apart from other people who do what you do? And one I really like is, what do you do in the opposite way to your competitors? So what we're doing with our authority content, we're building trust in your expertise. So by showcasing your expertise, by sharing something that you've learned and that you've mastered with each post, what I'm trying to show here with the graphic is it's a cumulative compounding effect over time. So if you, Dave, do one post one time saying, in 2025, LinkedIn should be part of your marketing strategy, here's 3 reasons why, and then you never post again, you haven't built any authority. But if you do 100 posts like that a year, where you are constantly helping your prospective buyer to understand what they need to be doing in their marketing, that's when authority builds and compounds over time. It's going to demonstrate your skill and your knowledge. So what should come through on your content is how long you've been doing this, the depth of your skills. You don't want to be just talking about the surface level of these things. You want to show that you've really considered them and come up with your own unique solution or frameworks over a long period of working on these problems. You want to remove risks of unknowns for prospects. So when they're seeing how well you know your stuff and how much experience you have, in their mind, they're thinking, well, if I was to work with him, I know that I'm going to be, I'm not throwing money away on someone who's still kind of getting going. This is someone who really has deep knowledge of this. I just want to hand them money and know that that problem that I have is going to go away and be solved. You're going to move the prospect towards buying. So again, with that cumulative effect of your authority growing in their mind, the likelihood of them ultimately investing with you increases. There's a timing factor to this. Potentially somebody could follow you for 2 years, get a lot from your content, love reading it, really like you, but they don't need your help with their thing. But at some point, hopefully, because your content is resonating with them, it makes sense that at some point they are going to think, actually, I'm ready to spend. This actually is a problem for me, and it's become enough of a problem that I need to invest in getting help. I've been following Dave all this time. I know he's the right guy for me, so I'm going to book that call. And then outside of client work, something that I didn't realize at all when I started, but which has happened to me and many of my clients as well, is you're going to attract opportunities. So as well as just paying clients, you're going to have people with podcasts or with events reaching out and saying, I've been following you, I really like your stuff, I'd love if you would come on my show or speak at our event. And that's without even seeking it out. If you are seeking out those opportunities and proactively messaging people with these types of opportunities for you, if they've been following you, it's much more likely, of course, that they're going to be interested in having that conversation and going further, because you have proven yourself to be an industry expert. And doing those things, speaking at events or being on podcasts, is incredible marketing for your business. People get to see, who is this person? Do I enjoy spending time with them? Do they know their stuff? Do they have a way of being, a vibe that feels like somebody I would have a beer with and enjoy working with or being with in any capacity? So that, again, has been something that really took me by surprise. Pretty much every podcast I've been on has generated 1 or 2 clients for me. So, that could be $5,000 to $10,000 of work through an hour chatting with someone.
I guess, and the other thing is, obviously this is an old marketer's thing, but it's also about triangulation, right? you're turning up in different channels. So they might know you from your text work in LinkedIn, but then equally, if they've been following your stuff on LinkedIn or even just subconsciously in that sort of parasocial thing, and then they come across you on a long form format like this, it's much richer content. It's going to really it's going to just start wearing away at their kind of resistance in a weird sort of way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, something I love about being on podcasts is, all of the hard work is done by the host. You, the creator or the founder, get to just show up and, chat and really just share the stuff You're just answering questions. I typically don't have to prepare at all for a podcast. And then there's so many knock-on benefits from it. But yeah, to your point, if people have just been reading my stuff, then they finally get to see me on camera. Hopefully they go, okay, he's just like his written stuff. It's the same vibe, but now I get to see the person as well. And I can see that they are aligned. It feels like the same person, and I'm that much more inclined to work with them now. So you become a three-dimensional being rather than just, a photo on a page.
Yeah, and I think it sort of reminds me of the first time I saw Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And he's got a TED Talk, actually. It's a very early one before it became quite slick and it's sort of very disorganized and long and all this sort of stuff. But it really deepened my love of him because you realize what an incredible human being he was, and I think in the same way that's that sort of triangulation of these different formats all forming what is quite a realistic version of what that person actually is, as long as they're, really are authentic people. Tell me about selling, because I think a lot of people will, obviously the name of the game here is sales, what we're here to do is we're trying to market our businesses, and I do understand that what we're trying to do with authority and the personal brand is really about attraction rather than promotion. But at a certain point, you've got to ask for the sale, right? So how would you go about that?
Yeah, totally. Yep, that's right. So, we've covered the kind of two foundational pieces, which is authority content and personal content, educating the audience, sharing your stories. The third component is where you get paid. So I should stress that even without doing sales content, and I'll talk exactly about what that is in a second, even without doing overtly selling content saying, here's why you should buy from me, essentially, people will still, if you are building a personal brand, over the long term and being consistent with your messaging and your positioning, who are you working with, what's the outcome you get for them, they will reach out to you and you will still get clients that way. So a sales post is when you create a piece of content that's only where the only purpose of that content is to have people messaging or emailing saying, I want to work with you based on that thing you just shared. So the type of post that does that, there's a few. Essentially what you're doing is you're showing proof that you get results. So the classic one would be the case study. So you would show the before, the bridge, and the after. So you might say, before I worked with Dave, he was posting on LinkedIn and he had, he only had 100 connections or followers on there, and he was never really getting any likes on his posts. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to post. He felt it took way too long to create content. So I'm listing all these problems that I know people have. And then I say, I worked with Dave for 6 weeks and we dialed in his positioning. We transformed his profile and we did these 3 other things. And now, Dave lives in Bali and he's making X per month and he's built the life of his dreams. Maybe not that.
That sounded good.
Yeah. You like that?
Yeah.
So, so it would be showing this desirable outcome state. So typically, it would be something like, now they're earning X per month. If they're working with me, now they're earning X per month and they have confidence around their content and a sustainable kind of content framework to work within. And then I would include a quote. I'm thinking of somebody I work with in the UK, Aaron, who's a sales coach. His quote is, his testimonial is something like, I'm consistently hitting £20,000 months and I know what to post about and when to post, and the system's working like clockwork, and I would highly recommend working with Sam, something like that. So we show this lovely story of, that the hero's journey, and then we have the real person at the end of it reinforcing, this is true, this really did happen for me. And hopefully, if you're a business owner and you do have a track record of success, you can come up with many of these. You don't need 50 of them, but if you have 10 of them from the past 5 years or so. That's ideal to just show that, what you do actually does work. You do actually get results. So people are always asking themselves on social media, it's all well and good that you know what you're doing and that you have good systems and stuff, but show me the outcome. Show me the ROI that other people just like me have had as a result of spending with you. So, whether your service costs $2,000 or $100,000, they want to look at that and say, well, that person paid $100,000 and then they made it an additional $800,000 the next year. Okay, that's an ROI. That's worth it for me and for my business. So it's all relative. It doesn't discriminate in terms of the size of the spend. It's all about, what are we going to get for our money? A classic mistake people make is they get really into the weeds about how they do what they do. We're going to work with you for 90 days and we start with an audit and then we do this. And the prospect, doesn't care about that at this point. They care about what is going to happen to me if I invest with you. You can get into all the process stuff when you start working together or just before, when you're really getting down to brass tacks of, look, I'm pretty serious about working with you. I just want to understand the process better. That's when you have that conversation. But for social media, keep it high level and keep it focused on these are the outcomes that we achieved.
Yeah, I think it's very easy, especially in marketing, which obviously I'm talking from experience here, which is actually very hard and complicated and very operational. It's easy to drift into talking about, I don't know, content frameworks and things like that, which really why people come to us is because they want to increase their revenue or they want to increase their brand or both. So that's something that's really good to hear, I think, because it is very difficult to get easy to get tied into these kind of complicated things that are not really anyone's business. I mean, if you're a business owner, you just want it to go away,
Yeah,
and that's why you're reaching out to someone like you or someone like me, because ultimately they potentially could do it themselves, but they don't want to, and so there's that aspect of it as well.
Definitely. I think, we as business owners, we spend years developing these systems and refining them and tweaking them. So we're kind of trying to make it clear to clients, hey, I spent a lot of time working on this. It's a really good system. It's not like the other systems. And that's just not what the client cares about, but it's understandable that you care about it and you're proud of it. I have to constantly remind myself, don't talk about the process, talk about the outcomes. That's what people are buying. You can talk about process on the discovery call potentially if and when that comes up. But, this is about you are selling a solution. They have a problem, as you say, they want it to just go away. So the less kind of stuff and learning and new software and new systems they have to think about, the better. Ideally they want to hand you money and never think about it again and the problem's just gone. So yeah, it's an easy mistake to make. But yeah, in terms of your sales posts, that's a really good one. Case study. Another one that I use a lot is a sales page post. This is where the post, the writing, the copy essentially operates just like a landing page. So, we talk about at the very top of the page, are you someone who is struggling with this problem? You might have tried this and you got this disappointing outcome. So it's not as blatant or cheesy as I'm describing it, but that's essentially the framework that we're following. And then you show, well, if you work with me, these are the things that are going to happen. And then I might share a handful of one sentence testimonials of people saying, yeah, I did this thing and it really did work as described. Then you finish at the bottom with a call to action that might have some scarcity or urgency. I've got space for 3 more clients starting in October. If you think this might be right for you, insert call to action here, send me a DM or click the link on my profile. I've used that a lot. It's worked really well. And I should stress again, these work well when you've done the fundamental work of building authority and building trust. They won't work if all you do is sell. People will just ignore your stuff. It has to be a combination.
I can also confirm that, you do without, explicit sales posts like this, that I've got business from LinkedIn from the, combination of the authority and personal, presumably, that where, unbidden, people have got in touch with me. I think the way that your system works, where it's mostly attraction and a little bit of promotion, is probably the correct mix, because people ultimately, especially in a salesy like forum like LinkedIn, people want to want to work with you because they chose to, or they've got that agency that they have chosen to. They've seen all the evidence and they've made up their mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's a cumulative thing over time. So, you're kind of, I think of it as, you're kind of putting deposits in your social currency bank account. And then when you do a sales post, you're making a withdrawal. And the key is to be depositing, and having essentially compound interest as a result of that, where you become more and more recognized and hopefully liked, and your content is known to your industry. And that results in, more demand. You can charge higher rates. You become perceived as a premium option. So it really changes the game for you as a business owner. Ironically, the less that you sell, there's been periods where I sort of haven't sold at all. You do have to, you definitely do, as you alluded to, you do actually want to ask for the sale, so to speak, sometimes, but you don't, if you get into the point where 30 or 40% of your content is selling and saying, get in touch now, sale can't last, it just really changes your vibe on social. And people have their guard up for that. They're not going on social media, even LinkedIn, to be sold to. They're essentially going there to hang out and to be entertained, and with some exceptions obviously, but generally speaking, more and more we're seeing people treating LinkedIn as part of their online content consumption, and it's sort of the business aspect of it. So we've all had that experience of reading a non-fiction business book where the author is not very subtly constantly hitting us over the head with, we talk more about this in my super premium mastermind, and here's the link, by the way. And it's like, man, like I'm giving you my time and attention to your content. I didn't come here to be not very subtly sold to constantly. But if we take that example further, if they have a page at the beginning and the end of the book kind of saying, this is my company and this is what I do, that is when you're going to really effectively sell. You're not desperately looking for the next client, but you are making it easy for people to take action when they're ready. That's essentially what you're doing with your social content.
I think the other thing that I find super interesting about what we've talked about today is that, everything you're saying really is the antithesis of the quick fix LinkedIn tech bro, stuff that what you're essentially saying is that you need consistency. You need to have a system, and you need to be thoughtful about what you're doing, and you kind of need to be authentic, and is right down to actually having evidence of what you've done. And those are the things that are actually going to get you the success, not the 5 days of LinkedIn madness or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, LinkedIn deservedly has a bad name as being, full of really cringy, humble bragging and showing off. And, it's true. It's all true. So there's plenty of that. And then there's plenty of amazing, thoughtful, unique content from, people that you would pay to hear speak. And they're sharing their thoughts for free on there more or less constantly. So like most social media, I guess, there's a lot of trash and there's some gold in there as well. And
an aspect of civility, though, isn't there? I still think that LinkedIn is one of the nicest social media platforms for that reason. Maybe it's because you've got your name and your job title attached to it. It's got its flaws, but it is still a forum that, if you're like I love what I do and I love business as well. It's kind of for that reason, it's actually a much more preferable forum than other social media platforms, right?
Yeah, there's certainly, there is no anonymity on there. So everything you say and do can easily be traced back to you. Every comment, for example, people can easily look through your past comments. And so, if you have a very outspoken political view, that is either going to attract or repel people who would have otherwise worked with you. I've seen very pro-Trump people, for example, and that is going to have an effect on your business probably, where people go, well, I'm not pro-Trump, so even if I kind of like what you do, you're no longer in the running for my business. The other thing is it's very heavily moderated. So like if you posted something and I went, get stuffed, Dave, you're a wanker, as a comment, I'm probably going to get a temporary ban for that. If anybody reports that comment and it's reviewed by LinkedIn and they say, yeah, okay, you're abusing that person, and potentially I'll get a lifetime ban. It doesn't take a whole lot of that kind of behavior for them to just boot you off the platform forever. I've got a funny story about that actually. When I first started on LinkedIn, somebody who I'd made friends with on LinkedIn posted something. I can't remember what it was, but my reply was, I called him an SOB in a joking way. And I wrote the words out, something like, you amazing SOB. But it had those words in it. And LinkedIn gave me a lifetime ban for that.
No.
Yeah. And I was like, damn, this is a disaster.
This is quite serious. Yeah.
And so what I did was I found their support or their contact people, which was really hard. They make it really hard. And I shared with them a blog post about how New Zealanders culturally call each other, swear at each other. It's really common. And this was sort of some blog, that was like, oh, New Zealanders do this and that. I guess it was relatively authoritative. But anyway, it was like, this is part of our cultural makeup. And I sent them this thing and I'm like, look, I feel like I'm being cancelled for my culture. I feel like you don't understand my culture and I'm sorry. And sure enough, they rescinded the ban.
Nice.
But I certainly learned my lesson. Like they literally had said, you're off LinkedIn forever.
Well, we wouldn't be having this conversation if you hadn't managed to get around that and actually appeal to the cultural zeitgeist that is New Zealand, New Zealand mannerisms. So,
right.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So be careful out there. Don't
be careful.
Call anybody an SOB.
Keep it clean. Keep it clean, and and maybe if you're gonna go political, then think really hard about it because you're gonna in most cases, if it's politics, then 40% of your audience are going to not like it if you go down that route. We're coming towards the end of the show, and I think that people will be very curious about how to get in touch with you and what's the sort of next step. Talk us through what Link Minded is and how it works.
Yeah, sure, cool. So I've been working one-to-one with clients for the last 2 years, and Link Minded is the first time that I have shared my complete LinkedIn system in a group coaching setting. So I'm starting on the 7th of October, and I'm doing live coaching calls on Tuesdays and Fridays. And the idea is for somebody who is a business owner, wants to build their personal brand on LinkedIn. They've maybe dabbled a little bit with posting here and there, and they've sort of set up their profile maybe, but essentially, they want to get the complete system and have clarity around how to be doing what we've been talking about today. So, building authority, building trust, generating leads through LinkedIn. Link Minded is the community. So I've built a circle community, which is like a private social network. And then the system that I teach is called the Mindshare method. So we're going to do 6 weeks of coaching of the whole system. And then once you've finished the coaching, you will have access to the Link Minded community for life. I'm just doing that for the first cohort. In future, I'll be doing sort of a subscription-based thing where it's, $100 a month or something like that. And the idea is to have this network of other entrepreneurs in the group globally, all supporting each other. So when you're posting, you're not just posting to no one. You've got other people chiming in with supportive comments and likes, and that will give your content a boost for the algorithm. And so it's really difficult. It's even more so now than when I started to get that initial groundswell, that traction that kind of gets the wheel turning. And so I'm trying to solve that with the community and also just, doing this stuff together because it can be quite challenging doing it all on your own. So I'll be hosting experts talking about different topics, email marketing, landing pages, these sorts of things. And then, teaching stuff myself. So adding additional resources into the community over time. For example, I'll probably do something speaking specifically around graphic design for social media or outbound lead generation. But for right now, the first and the flagship course is the Mindshare method, my complete LinkedIn system.
Yeah, look, I can maybe speak to this a little bit from my own personal experience because obviously we've been working together for a few weeks, and I can say that my personal experience with Sam's been amazing. The system works really well for me in terms of that it's a nice combination of being systematic without being, there are definitely, you can tell people who are working to much more template types of systems that their content becomes very samey. And so it works really well for me. I guess the thing that we touched on it earlier, but the thing that I kind of like, and I guess it talks to, I don't know, my makeup, is that it is actually about turning up in an authentic way that is consistent with my goals and my values. And I have had to push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit in order to, to talk about myself. It's not something that comes naturally to me in terms of, well, it just doesn't come naturally, especially in social media. But one of the reasons I got in touch with Sam was that I realized I'd spent years building other people's brand and authority, in various roles and with Europa. And ultimately that your personal brand is like your insurance policy. It's there regardless of your job and what you're doing. And so that's kind of why it's become important to me. So yeah, I can definitely give you some, hopefully I'll be one of your success stories on your sales post.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's incredibly important. And I think what I like is, I really like the way that you're not selling a quick fix. You're not selling something that is about tricking people or being excessively manipulative or anything like that. This is really about turning up really digitally the way that you do personally, which I think is what everyone wants.
Man, that's a really good way of putting it. I might have to steal that. Turning up digitally the way you do organically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yep. Well put.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will be one of the success stories. You already are, doing such a good job of sharing who you are through your content. So yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. Well, Sam, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on Slideshow. Hopefully, you'll come back. We'd love to have you back on. And it's been a real honor having you here. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Dave. My pleasure.